Okay, so this tactic goes by different names: uncovered attack, discovered attack. Occasionally I've heard X-ray. And you can have it as a discovered check or even discovered checkmate occasionally. But what happens in this situation is that a piece moves out of the way of one of its friendly colleagues. That's a long range piece. So a discovery is going to be by a bishop, a rook, or a queen. And this moving away discovers, if you like, an attack on an enemy piece or square. And of course, if the piece that's moving out the way also moves to attack something, then all of a sudden you'll have given your opponent at least two different threats to deal with. And that obviously is really, really difficult for them to have to deal with multiple problems. So let's just look at a few quick examples. I mean, I've got the pictures down here. So really, really simply, in this first one, you've got a bishop moving to h2, giving check to the white king. Of course, white has to deal with the check. And now the bishop moving has uncovered or discovered the attack from the rook on the white queen. And so bishop h2 check, king takes bishop, rook takes queen. It's a similar one here. The bishop that was on d2 has moved to g5, giving check. The black king has to do whatever the black king's going to do to escape check. And then the rook from f2 takes on b2. This one, similar to the first one, the bishop will go to h7 with check. The king deals with the bishop, and it's uncovered an attack from the rook to the queen. So anyway, let's see a couple of those on diagrams. So similar to the ones on the first slide, we can see here's the clue for the discovered attack, the rook and the queen on the same line. Black, as say, is feeling very proud of himself. He's material ahead. Yeah, black is material ahead. He or she is queen for a rook and a bishop and an extra pawn. Great. But in for a rude awakening. And it's because bishop to h6 is check. And it uncovers, discovers, x-rays, whatever you want to say, an attack from the rook on the black queen. So bishop, check, king takes bishop, rook takes queen. And there's demonstration with the arrows. Now in this one, nothing is immediately obvious, but with black to move, we can see there's a bishop blocked currently by the knight, but pointing at h2. There's a black queen pointing at h2, so this should be a bit of a clue that something's going on if this knight isn't in the way. And in fact, black can pretty much destroy the white position immediately. How? Well, he or she will play knight to e4. And from knight to e4, various things are happening. The first thing is that the knight is threatening the white queen. So white has to do something because knight takes queen is a problem. The second thing is that the queen is now definitely threatening to take on h2, which is checkmate, because the knight has got out the way and the bishop is now protecting that square as well. There's no way really that white can defend against both threats. For example, white might play g3, which blocks the bishop again, so h2 is safe, but then knight takes queen. Or not very much really. I mean, white can try putting the queen in the way there to protect h2, but bishop takes queen. There's just no way to defend both threats. So it's the discovered attack that wins the day. And there we can see the arrows showing all these different things. Okay, so here we've got black to move, and black's noticed that there's an unprotected white piece floating around the white side of the board here. So how can black use a discovered attack to win this rook? It's a fairly similar pattern to the last puzzle. If you want to try and solve it, press pause. And if you manage to spot that queen takes queen is the right move, well done. Why is it the right move? Well, queen takes queen forces white to recapture because obviously it's check. Now what happens now? Again, if you want to pause, if you were a bit stuck and you didn't find this, maybe you can now. So queen takes queen has happened and king takes queen has happened. What's black's next move? And the next move is going to be knight to g4 check. And it's not check from the knight, of course. The knight's far too far away from the white king to be giving check, but it moves out of the way to g4 and discovers this attack from the bishop along this black square diagonal. So the white king then has to do something about getting out of check, king c1 or whatever, f3, it doesn't matter. And then black's next move is just to play knight takes rook, winning the game. It will win the game because black will have so many more pieces. And there we can see the arrows. Okay, so this one, so we got black to move here. By now, the pattern should be reasonably obvious, but let's see if you can spot it. What's black's move to play and win the game here? And in this instance, I'm pretty confident it's checkmate in 2 black moves. Press pause if you want to have a go at finding this one. And well done if you spotted that rook to e1, rook to d1 check is the winning move. Why? Well, white has to deal with the check. There's only 2 ways to do it, really. White can either take the rook, so rook takes d1, or white can put the bishop in the way. So let's see what happens in either case. So if white plays rook takes d1, this rook now not being here has uncovered this battery of the queen and bishop, and queen takes bishop here. Queen takes g2 is checkmate. King takes queen, no good, because the queen's supported by the bishop. The other thing that white can try, not that it's a whole lot of help. I've just noticed something a bit silly on the diagram, actually. I'll explain in a sec. The other thing, of course, that white can do is put the bishop in the way on f1, blocking the check, but that doesn't help because the queen can then come all the way to h1, which is checkmate. Well, if anyone spotted, of course, I'm supposed to have put a white queen on the board somewhere. When I set the diagram up, I think I've just forgotten to put a white queen on. But imagine there was a white queen on a square that doesn't make, actually, no, b3, well, it would actually still work, so that's interesting. So even if there was a white queen on b3, for example, just giving white a third way to deal with the check on d1, queen takes rook, it still wouldn't help because you'd still have queen takes g2 checkmate. So even though, yeah, I've forgotten to put a white queen on the board, yeah, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. As long as there's still this check available, the discovery will be deadly. All right, so were I to be doing this one in a classroom, I'd now click on that particular link there, and it would take us to a 3 or 4 minute video. It might be a bit longer, maybe 5 or 6, by a grandmaster called Eric Schiller, going through a game with an example of what's called a windmill. I think it would be a bit cheeky to screen share Schiller's video, but if you want to look up Eric Schiller's video of the windmill by a player called Harwitz, it's quite a good tactic. So do feel free, but I have a different way of doing this, and I'm going to share a different screen for a sec to do this, so bear with me. And I'm going back to the tactics course from Dr. Dave Regis of the Exeter Chess Club, because he actually gives a couple of examples of the windmill as a discovered attack tactic in his course. So yeah, this briefly appears in another video, but I'm just going to use it again here because it's quite good and quite instructive. So sorry about the daft opening. Well, don't worry, doctor, don't worry. The main thing is this position. So we've just had black has recaptured a piece on e6, and it's white to move. And we look at the material, 2 rooks, 2 bishops, and a queen is equal on both sides, but black seems to have an extra knight. So black's a piece up here. So white's got to do something. What white does is make use of a discovered check tactic called the windmill. And the move is to play rook takes g7 check. So the first thing to note is there's a bishop on b2, so the rook can't be taken. You can't play king takes rook. Oh, excuse me, swallow my breath there. In fact, there's only one legal move. It's king to h8. And now, of course, here comes the discovered check, because the king's on the same diagonal as this bishop. And so what will happen is white will play rook takes bishop here, and it's check. Okay, lovely. Black has to get out of the check. And there's various things that black can try. I mean, for example, pawn on maybe, but bishop takes, knight takes, rook takes, bishop, whatever. It just doesn't work. So what black does in the actual game is puts the king back to g8. Why not? The white rook then comes from this square where it had captured the bishop and goes back to g7. Check. Still protected by the bishop, so the king goes back to the corner. Oh dear. And now the rook can go along and hoover up the next piece. So rook takes d7. It's check from the bishop again. So black can't recapture the rook. Black has to get out of check. And so once again, okay, we'll try king to g8. And guess what happens now? The rook goes back to g7, forces the king to h8, and now the rook can hoover up the next piece. So rook across to b7, it gives check from the bishop, and this series of discovered checks just allows white to hoover up this entire row. And there's not really anything black can do about it. If you wanted to get a board up and set up the options, there's a couple of other ways black can try to get out the check, but they don't work for different reasons. We won't go into that. It's good for viewers to sort of analyze themselves. But the final move after white has picked up both bishops, the knight, probably the pawn if white's feeling greedy, is to go rook to g7, the king goes to h8, and this time just put the rook back to d7, and when the king moves, rook takes queen. What you'll have found from this discovered attack, the windmill, is the entire row here will have gone, the black queen will have gone, and all white will have lost in return is the black rook. It's quite the tactic. It's great fun when you're the one that's on the winning end of it. Not so much fun when it's done against you. But the windmill, very common discovered attack tactic. We'll just scroll down quickly because you can have it with a bishop as well. Doesn't have to be the rook. So again, this one is in the other video where I've used Dr. Regis's course with his permission, of course, very kind of him. And in this game, it's a bishop doing the windmilling. So again, you can set the board up if you wish to look at the various tactics going on. But white's just played knight to f3, which attacks the black queen and defends h2. So white probably thinks he or she's doing quite well. Thank you very much. Not so much, because knight takes f2 actually wins the game, and we can see the analysis here as to why. So if white takes the queen on h4, now we've got the bishop and king on the same diagonal. So knight takes queen is actually check. So black's recovered the queen. The king has no particularly good move except to go to h1. And now the knight will come back to f2. It's check again from the knight this time. If rook takes knight, bishop takes rook, black's just winning. And if the king goes back to g1, we have knight takes bishop check, check from the bishop. And we have much the same sort of thing as we had last time. So the knight and the bishop together are just able to hoover up 2 or 3 pieces. So that is the windmill tactic, the discovered attack that they call the windmill. Okay, so just back to this one, back to the PowerPoint just to finish off. And so, yeah. So hopefully, as I hope you enjoyed the game there on YouTube. So I'm not going to steal Eric Schiller's work there, but I do recommend you go and have a little look. Eric's got quite a lot of quite nice videos on chess to have a look through. But it's your turn to try to create your own little masterpiece. Okay, so when you're playing, remember to write down the moves as you go along. And you can go through it afterwards with your opponent, you can discuss your ideas, or you can even think about using a computer to help you with your analysis. Just whatever you do, don't use them to play the games. But okay, good luck with your chess.